Ah, December, a time of lights, holiday cheer, geeky wrapping paper, and this year, Cyberpunk 2077. I still have my ghost lights up. It's Christmas time. They're the ghosts of Christmas past. Welcome back. I'm glad you're coming back for a second video. I'm glad I'm coming back for a second video. That would make this really awkward if one of us didn't show. So thanks for being here. Today we're doing a holiday thing. And in case you didn't guess the theme of holiday and Cyberpunk 2077, we're doing a Cyberpunk 2077 holiday craft. So what we're going to be doing is a character stocking. I'm going to throw up a picture on the screen of the most recent ones I made, but basically it's just going to be kind of the clothing of a fictional character in a stocking form. Easy as that. Our character stocking is going to be a V, naturally, and the very popular jacket that's on the cover art. I have not gotten this jacket yet in game, which is a bummer, but I've been told it's coming soon, so huzzah. We got a lot going on, so let's go ahead and hop on over to the planning phase. Here's what I'm thinking about doing. The front of the stocking is going to be the front center of the character jacket. So you're going to see the zipper and opening, the LED collar, and it's probably going to cut off right at the bottom center of this piping detail right here. I'm going to list the materials here in a second, but there are a few details I want to call attention to. So we have this cool piping detail on the front of the jacket. I'm hoping to achieve this with foam clay. We'll see how that goes. There's a tubing detail on the side of the collar. This is for the wires to get down to the power source. I'm hoping to achieve this on our stocking jacket using weather stripping. I thought that would be a neat creative way to portray this. So we'll see how that goes. There's one other thing, and hopefully we'll have space for it, but there's really cool lettering up at the top of the jacket right here. And I bought some really pretty holographic Cricut vinyl that hopefully we get to use, but it is dependent on space, so we'll see. We have a few new things on this project that I've never worked with before that I'm really excited about. I get to use foam clay for the first time, which I've seen it used before in other YouTube videos, and it just looks super fun. We have LED foam, and we're going to learn how to solder lights. I'm really excited to get started on this, so let's get rolling. Material time! This is Holly of the future where the project has been completed. There will be a few things on the screen that did not get implemented into the project, but I will leave a list in the description of what we used. Let's move on to the patterning. To create our base template, we're just gonna borrow that real quick. Boom. Go ahead and trace the outline. Bold the lines to make it easier to see. And don't forget to add a seam allowance. At this point, I would recommend taking a step that I did not and mark the right side of your pattern. This will save you some potential complications. Put your scissors to use, and voila, pattern. Now let's get this fabric cut out. First the pleather, and then the t-shirt, lining the pattern up with the collar of the shirt. Freeze right there. Do you see my mistake? Because I didn't until a good 30 minutes later. I forgot to mark the right side of my pattern. Luckily, we hadn't cut into the pleather pieces yet, so it was easy to reverse. The direction just won't match the other stockings in my household, and that's okay. That's okay. Finish cutting out your new backward stocking, and let's move back to the pleather pieces. Measure how wide you would like the front jacket opening, center it on the front of the pleather piece, then mark on the back and cut. Save the middle piece you just cut out. We're going to use that for the flap that goes kind of behind, kind of next to the zipper in the front. Speaking of zippers, let's go ahead and put ours in. Line up the zipper to both sides, pin, and sew. Next I hemmed the center flap and measured out where I want the points of the zigzag design that's top stitched in. Then I just stitched back and forth from each point. I pinned the flap to the front left side underneath the zipper and sewed it down. And huzzah! It's starting to look like a thing. After the zippers and flap were sewn in, I went back and added a decorative second stitch to each zipper side. I want to go ahead and work on the collar, so let's go ahead and sew the top shoulder bit so that we can sew that in easily. We're going to pin and sew the back side of the collar, then hand stitch the inside. With the collar done, Let's move on to the shirt. Now, before we start sewing on the t-shirt, I wanted to take the opportunity to doodle out a design for the front of the tee. I reached deep within to find my middle school art skills, but apparently reached too deep and got 5th grade. Any further back and it would have been that weird S symbol that nobody can explain but everybody knew how to draw. He turned out a bit weird, but I think it fits. Let's put it on the shirt. Progress. Now let's work on these front piping type details. For this I used black cauldron foam clay, and it was super fun to work with. The texture is just great. And it was super easy to sculpt, carve, and cut. One thing I would recommend though is sculpting this more on the curve that your stocking is going to have towards the sides. It does get brittle when it dries in thin areas. While we wait for that to dry, it's LED time. My favorite time. I cut out 7 strips of 8 LEDs. The lights I have that gel waterproof coating. We just need to peel that back from where we're going to solder. Let's set that up in our helping hands tool and start stripping some wire. Before tinning the wire ends, I went ahead and separated them just a bit. This made it easier for a newbie like me. Next, let's tin the wire ends, tin the LED strip, and solder them both together. Before we go any further, I just want to say that this is my first time soldering anything. I am a newbie to this, so I apologize if this is cringy to people who do this all the time. I'm learning. Thanks for understanding. After doing this for all 7 strips, it was time for a light test. Light test successful. Huzzah! Now let's grab the LED foam and cut out the collar shape. After doing a minor test fit, I trimmed a little bit off the bottom to give it a bit of a curve and cut out a second piece that goes around the back. Cut out this piece just a little bit longer so it wraps around and meets the edges of the front. Now it's time to bring back my old friend the hot glue gun and attach these LED strips to the collar. I bent the collar during this process to make sure the glue was drying on a curve. I know now that the collar is not going to hold this harsh of a curve when we get to the finished portion of this, however I thought it was a good starting point. Next I cut out the fabric pieces for the collar cover. I cut an oversized panel for the back, although I did end up trimming this way down, and I cut a window portion for the front. For the graphic on the collar, I recreated the shapes in Photoshop and cut it out with my Cricut machine. It was at this point I decided not to use the plastic vinyl for that front window. It's not going to lay as flat as I would like, so instead I just decided to put the Cricut vinyl graphic in between 2 layers of contact paper. This offers more flexibility and just a tad bit more diffusion. Let's put this to the side for now and hop back over to sewing. But real quick before we sew, go ahead and cut a small opening for the wire of your LED lights to run to the back of the stocking. Pin and sew the back panel to the side strip for this collar cover, then same for the front. I ended up sewing darts in the corners and in the top center and bottom center of that front window to try to get the shape I was going for. This still ended up being a bit flatter than I was expecting, but it ended up working. I put in spacers on top of the LED lights, then added in the top LED foam layer. I put the graphic in as straight as I could, then hot glued down those front window edges. Before we start putting everything together, we need something to hold the battery pack. I cut out a small pocket and sewed it onto the back of the stocking. After that, I glued down those foam clay details we made earlier and trimmed off the edges. Bring the shirt pieces back over and pin and sew all along the sides. Huzzah! The end is in sight. Just a few more steps. Initially, I was planning on connecting the collar to the tops of the shoulders, however, it's not quite curved enough for that, so what we're going to use instead is the magical Velcro, which we'll apply once we have everything sewn up. So let's go ahead and do that. I stitched each side from the top to the center bottom. That in-between space I'm going to hand stitch down. Go ahead and trim the zippers, making sure the zipper pull is above the cut area. Now we can slap on some Velcro. With the slight collar changes that have happened throughout this project, it left me in a slight conundrum of where to put the stocking loop. I decided it's best to go ahead and run it inside the stocking and have it come out through the back in a small opening, and we'll just stitch it down around that opening. The top of the loop will be Velcroed to the collar to help it stand up a little bit straighter. After nesting the t-shirt inside the jacket, I stitched the back of the shirt down near the collar area. Then the zipper sides to the front of the shirt. Make sure you don't stitch the front and back of the shirt together, otherwise you're not going to have a very accessible stocking. Attach the collar, and let's add one last detail before we go to final shots. We're back, and we made the thing. It's not really hanging quite right up here, but you get the point. You got the final shots. You see in the thing. It's all good. A few design changes happened along the way, a few minor frustrations, but it all worked out in the end. We have an LED light up collar, we learned how to solder LED lights, and we played with LED foam and clay foam. Both new things to me. Totally awesome. Going to use them again for the future. And also, look, it does I'm able to do the things. So thank you for joining in. I greatly appreciate you being here with me on this magical, technical, cyberpunknical crafting adventure. I hope you have a wonderful holiday, a great and safe new year, and I will see you in 2021. Till next time.